She looks at his message and smiles. It says nothing, but she reads everything into it. 3 dots, a simple hey, the pause between scene and reply. In these fragments, she builds castles. She builds futures. She builds the love she's been starving for since she learned that waiting was the price of being wanted. But watch closely. Watch her fingers trace the screen like it's a prayer book. Watch how her breath catches, not with joy, but with the familiar ache of hope dressed as certainty. This moment, this digital whisper, becomes her universe. She doesn't see the message. She sees salvation. She did this before, at 14, waiting for her father to notice she existed. Standing at the kitchen window, watching for his car, rehearsing the words that might make him stay longer, love deeper, see her as more than an obligation with his eyes. She learned then that love was something you earned through perfect behavior, through making yourself small enough to fit into the spaces others left behind. She calls it love, but it's not. It's memory chasing resolution. You see, the heart has no calendar. It doesn't distinguish between then and now, between father and lover, between the child who waited and the woman who still waits. It only knows the familiar rhythm of longing, the sweet poison of hope deferred, the way abandonment tastes like almost love. She sits in her apartment, surrounded by the evidence of her independence, her degrees, her achievements, her carefully curated life. Yet in this moment, she becomes that little girl again, standing at the window with her breath fogging the glass, waiting for someone to come home and make her whole. This is the first deception, the primary wound from which all others flow. You don't see him. You see the version your abandonment created. You see the father who might finally stay. You see the love that might finally be enough. You see the man who might finally choose you, not despite your flaws, but because of your desperate perfection. But he is not your father. He is not your salvation. He is not the key to the lock your childhood placed on your heart. He is simply a man, flawed and human, carrying his own wounds, his own patterns, his own unconscious dance with intimacy and distance. Yet in your eyes, he becomes mythic. He becomes the answer to every prayer you never knew you were praying. The phone buzzes again. Another message. Her heart leaps, not with love, but with the familiar adrenaline.
Validation. She doesn't love him yet. She loves the feeling of being chosen, of being seen, of being worth a message, a moment, a maybe. This is not love. This is the addiction to intermittent reinforcement, the slot machine of the heart that keeps you pulling the lever, hoping this time will be different. In the depths of her psyche, ancient patterns stir. The anima, that eternal feminine principle, reaches toward the masculine not in wholeness, but in woundedness. She seeks in him what she could never find in herself, the approval, the validation, the sense of being worthy of love. But love that requires your disappearance isn't love. It's self-erasure. Watch her transform. Watch how she begins to edit herself, to become the version she thinks he wants. Her laugh becomes softer, her opinions more palatable, her needs smaller. She doesn't do this consciously. This is the ancient dance of the wounded feminine, the belief that love is something you earn through perfect compliance, through making yourself into whatever shape the other person needs. She becomes a mirror, reflecting back his desires, his moods, his needs. But mirrors don't love. They only reflect. And what she's reflecting isn't love. It's the projection of her own abandoned child, seeking in him the parent who never came, the love that never stayed, the acceptance that always came with conditions. The tragic irony is that in trying to become what she thinks he wants, she loses what made her lovable in the first place. Her authenticity, her wildness, her complex humanity, all sacrificed on the altar of acceptance. She becomes a ghost of herself, haunting her own life, waiting for someone else to breathe life into her emptiness. This is the realm of the idealista, the woman who loves not the man before her, but the fantasy of being loved. She creates elaborate narratives from minimal evidence. A glance becomes a promise. A touch becomes a commitment. Silence becomes mystery rather than disinterest. She becomes the author of her own heartbreak, writing love stories in invisible ink. But underneath this desperate performance, her body knows. Her nervous system remembers every abandonment, every rejection, every moment she learned that love was conditional. The anxiety that courses through her veins when he doesn't respond quickly enough. The way her chest tightens when he mentions other women. The insomnia that comes from waiting for proof of his feelings. Her body is screaming.
Truth her mind refuses to hear. This is not love. This is trauma, dressed in the language of romance. The most dangerous part is how familiar this feels, how right it seems to suffer for love, to wait for love, to beg for love, because this is what she learned love was: uncertain, conditional, requiring constant vigilance and perfect behavior. The healthy relationships feel boring to her. The kind men feel too easy. The available partners feel somehow lacking. She has confused intensity with intimacy, chaos with chemistry, anxiety with attraction. She looks at herself in the mirror and sees a stranger. When did she become this person? When did her confidence become so dependent on his attention? When did her worth become tied to his choice? The woman staring back at her is a shadow of who she used to be, shaped by someone else's approval, defined by someone else's desire. But here, in this moment of recognition, lies the beginning of awakening, the first crack in the armor of illusion, the first question that might lead to freedom. Who was I before I needed him to see me? What did I love before I loved the idea of being loved? What dreams did I have before I made his attention my only dream? The mirror isn't love, it's memory. The reflection isn't truth, it's projection. The feeling isn't connection, it's the familiar ache of a wound trying to heal itself through repetition, through finding the same dynamic and hoping this time it will end differently. Before calling it love, ask, am I being seen or just used to being invisible? Am I being chosen or just available? Am I being loved or just useful? Because love that requires your disappearance isn't love, it's self-erasure. And you, sacred woman, were never meant to disappear. You were meant to be seen, to be chosen, to be loved for the fullness of who you are, not the emptiness of who you're willing to become. The phone buzzes again, but this time, instead of reaching for it immediately, she pauses. She breathes. She remembers, just for a moment, who she was before she learned that love was something you earned through perfect behavior, through making yourself small enough to fit into the spaces others left behind. This pause, this moment of recognition, is where love begins, not with him, but with herself. Not with being chosen, but with choosing. Not with being seen, but with seeing clearly. The mirror isn't love, it's memory. And it's time to stop living in the reflection and start
Living in the truth. She wakes before dawn, her phone the first thing her fingers seek. The screen illuminates her face in the darkness, And in that pale glow, she sees the architecture of her own prison. Message after message, each one a small negotiation with her worth. Each response calculated, measured, performed. She's become a curator of herself, displaying only the pieces she thinks he wants to see. There is a moment in every woman's awakening when she stands at the crossroads between who she was and who she's becoming. Not the crossroads between loving him or leaving him, but between abandoning herself or returning home to the sacred truth she forgot somewhere between childhood and now. She stands there now, in the space between breath and breakthrough, between recognition and revolution. The phone sits silent on the table. For the first time in months, she doesn't reach for it. For the first time in years, she doesn't need to know if someone else is thinking of her to know that she matters. The absence of his attention doesn't create an absence in her being. She is learning, slowly, that her worth was never dependent on his gaze, his choice, his validation. This is the beginning of individuation, not the Jungian concept wrapped in academic language, but the lived experience of a woman remembering she was whole before she was broken, complete before she was chosen, sacred before she was seen. Individuation is not about becoming someone new. It's about returning to who you always were, beneath the layers of conditioning, beneath the patterns of pleasing, beneath the belief that love was something you earned through perfect behavior. She walks to her closet and sees it differently now. Not a costume department for the performance of acceptability, but a collection of expressions, each piece a choice about how she wants to move through the world. She reaches for the dress she bought months ago but never wore. Too bold, too bright, too much. Too her. She puts it on and feels something shift. Not the familiar anxiety of will he like it, but the quiet confidence of this is me. In the mirror, she sees a stranger who is also herself. The woman looking back has eyes that are no longer searching for approval, hands that are no longer reaching for validation, a posture that is no longer bent in the shape of apology. She sees the woman she was before she learned that love was conditional, before she learned that her worth was negotiable,
learned that being chosen was more important than choosing. This is the sacred feminine rising, not from the ashes of a broken heart, but from the recognition that her heart was never broken, only covered, hidden, protected behind walls built from old wounds and older fears. The sacred feminine doesn't need to be rescued. She needs to be remembered. She doesn't need to be completed. She needs to be uncovered. She begins to see the elaborate prison she built from her own need to be loved. The bars were not made of his rejection, but of her own self-rejection. The locks were not turned by his indifference, but by her own abandonment of herself. The chains were not forged by his inconsistency, but by her own inability to be consistent with her own worth. She sees herself burning the wedding dress made of thorns, not a literal dress, but the costume of suffering she wore so long she forgot it wasn't her skin. Thread by thread, she unravels the garment woven from old beliefs, that love was supposed to hurt, that relationships were supposed to be hard, that if you weren't suffering, you weren't really in love. She watches it burn and feels not loss, but liberation. The flames consume everything that was never true, the belief that she was too much or not enough, the fear that she was unlovable unless she was perfect, the conviction that her needs were too big, her emotions too intense, her very existence too demanding. All of it burns away, leaving only what was always true. She is sacred, she is worthy, she is enough. She covers the mirror with a white veil, not to hide from herself, but to stop seeking herself in reflections. For too long she has looked for her worth in others' eyes, her beauty in others' appreciation, her value in others' choice. She decides to see herself with her own eyes, to know herself with her own heart, to love herself with her own hands. This is not narcissism. This is not selfishness. This is the radical act of self-recognition, the revolutionary choice to stop seeking permission to exist, to stop apologizing for taking up space, to stop earning her right to be loved. She was sacred before he looked at you. She was worthy before he chose her. She was enough before he said so. In the depths of her psyche, something that has been sleeping begins to stir. The golden bird that she caged in her need to be chosen, the wild thing that she tamed in her desperation to be loved, the free spirit that she clipped to fit into someone
Else's idea of acceptable. She opens the cage not with force, but with recognition. The bird doesn't fly away. It perches on her shoulder. Its song a reminder of who she was before she learned that freedom was loneliness, that wildness was unlovable, that her authentic self was too much for anyone to handle. The bird sings the song of her sovereignty, the melody of her wholeness, the rhythm of her own heart beating to its own time. She doesn't need to harmonize with anyone else. She doesn't need to keep time with someone else's rhythm. She is the song, the singer, and the audience all at once. She walks through her home and sees it differently now. Not a stage set for someone else's approval, but a sanctuary for her own becoming. She rearranges furniture not to accommodate imaginary guests, but to please her own aesthetic. She cooks meals not to prove her domesticity, but to nourish her own body. She tends to her plants, not as therapy for her loneliness, but as practice for her own care. Every small act becomes a declaration of independence. Every choice becomes a vote for her own worth. Every moment of self-care becomes an act of revolution against the belief that she was only valuable when she was useful to someone else. She remembers the woman she was before she learned that love was something you earned through disappearance. The woman who laughed too loud and felt too much and dreamed too big. The woman who took up space without apology, who spoke her truth without permission, who loved without guarantee. That woman didn't disappear. She was just waiting, patient as stone, for this moment of recognition. The rebirth is not dramatic. It's quiet, like dawn breaking over familiar landscape. It's the slow recognition that she doesn't need to be loved to be whole. She doesn't need to be chosen to be valuable. She doesn't need to be seen to be sacred. She was sacred before he looked at her. She was worthy before he chose her. She was enough before he said so. This doesn't mean she stops loving. It means she stops loving from desperation and starts loving from fullness. It means she stops seeking completion and starts offering celebration. It means she stops needing to be saved and starts trusting her own capacity for salvation. She sits in her garden as the sun sets, not waiting for anyone to join her, not wishing she had someone to share this moment with, but fully present to the beauty of her own company. The flowers don't bloom for her approval.
The birds don't sing for her entertainment. The world doesn't exist for her validation, and neither does she exist for anyone else's. She is not half of anything. She is not seeking her other half. She is whole, complete, sacred in her own right. When love comes, and it will come, it will not complete her. It will celebrate her. It will not save her. It will witness her. It will not fix her. It will see her. But first, she must see herself. She must witness her own beauty, her own worth, her own sacred nature. She must stop looking for herself in others' eyes and start recognizing herself in her own reflection. She must stop seeking permission to exist and start claiming her birthright to be exactly who she is. The phone buzzes. A message. She glances at it without urgency, without the familiar spike of anxiety or hope. She reads it with the same casual attention she might give to a weather report. Interesting, but not essential. Relevant, but not defining. She responds or doesn't respond based on her own desire, not her own need. This is freedom. Not the freedom from love, but the freedom to love from wholeness rather than woundedness. The freedom to choose rather than be chosen. The freedom to be seen rather than perform visibility. The freedom to be sacred in her own right rather than sanctified by someone else's approval. She stands in her power, not the power over others, but the power of self-recognition. She is the queen of her own kingdom, the author of her own story, the artist of her own existence. She doesn't need anyone to crown her. She was born wearing the crown. She just forgot for a while, in the darkness of seeking love in all the wrong places, that she was never meant to bow to anyone. The golden bird sings from her shoulder. The mirror reflects her true face. The prison dissolves into the nothing it always was. She is free. She is whole. She is sacred. She always was. Before calling it love, she called her soul back home. Before seeking to be chosen, she chose herself. Before looking for someone to complete her, she remembered she was never broken. She was just sleeping, dreaming someone else's dream of who she should be. Now she is awake. Now she is alive. Now she is herself. Not the version that accommodates, not the version that pleases, not the version that disappears to be loved, the version that exists in her own right, that loves from her own fullness, that is sacred before anyone looks at her, and sacred still when
Everyone looks away. She deserves love that sees her without pain, that chooses her without condition, that celebrates her without requiring her transformation. She deserves love that amplifies her rather than diminishes her, that witnesses her rather than judges her, that meets her in her wholeness rather than her woundedness. This is not too much to ask. This is the bare minimum of what sacred love requires. And she, in her remembering, in her awakening, in her return to herself, has become worthy of nothing less than the love that recognizes her divinity, celebrates her humanity, and never, ever asks her to disappear. She was sacred before he looked at her. She is sacred now. She will be sacred always. This is not something she earned. This is something she is. This is not something she became. This is something she remembered. This is not something she achieved. This is something she always was, waiting in the depths of her being for the moment when she would stop seeking herself in others and start recognizing herself in her own reflection. The moment is now. The woman is her. The sacred is this. The love is here. The home is within. The truth is simple. She was always enough. She was always worthy. She was always sacred. She just forgot for a while. In the beautiful, terrible, necessary journey of learning that love is not something you earn, but something you are. But what she doesn't realize is that she's vanishing, piece by piece, truth by truth, authentic moment by authentic moment. She's editing herself out of existence. This is the first truth buried beneath the word love, hidden so deep she doesn't recognize it as she lives it. If you vanish to be chosen, it was never your place. Watch her in the morning light as she stands before her closet, no longer choosing clothes that make her feel beautiful, but clothes that might make him look twice. Her body has become a canvas painted for his eyes, her voice modulated to frequencies that please his ears, her thoughts filtered through the mesh of his approval. She is removing her own skin, layer by layer, to fit into the shape of his desire. This is the ancient dance of the wounded feminine, the belief that love is earned through self-erasure. She doesn't know she's doing it. It feels like devotion, like care, like the natural sacrifice that comes with loving someone. But love does not require your disappearance. Love celebrates your presence. Love doesn't ask you to become smaller.
Invites you to become more yourself, not less. In the depths of her psyche, the anima bows to an unconscious animus, the eternal feminine serving not love, but the projection of masculine approval. She has confused accommodation with affection, compliance with connection, self-sacrifice with sacred love. But when you vanish to be chosen, you're not being chosen at all. You are being used as a mirror, a vessel, a space where someone else can see themselves reflected back in perfect validation. The second truth emerges as she finds herself scrolling through his social media, analyzing every comment, every like, every digital breadcrumb of his attention. She's become a detective of his heart, looking for clues about his feelings, his past, his wounds. And in those wounds, she sees opportunity. She sees something she can fix, something she can heal, something she can save. If you're fixing him, you're not loving him. You're mothering your past pain. This is the realm of the martyr, the woman who finds her worth in others' wounds. She doesn't love him, she loves the feeling of being needed. She doesn't see him. She sees the broken boy she was never able to heal in her father, her brother, her first love. She becomes an altar where she kneels alone, her hands bleeding from trying to put together the pieces of someone else's shattered heart, while her own lies unattended. She tells herself this is love. She tells herself this is what women do. She tells herself that caring means fixing, that loving means saving, that being chosen means being useful. But this is not love. This is the repetition of trauma, the unconscious attempt to heal old wounds through new people, the belief that if she can just love him enough, fix him enough, save him enough, she'll finally be worthy of the love she's been seeking since childhood. The tragic irony is that in trying to fix him, she abandons herself. She becomes a nurse to his wounds while her own fester in the darkness. She becomes a therapist to his pain while her own goes unheard. She becomes a mother to his inner child while her own remains neglected, crying in the corners of her psyche for the attention she gives so freely to others. But her body knows. Her body always knows. The third truth pulses through her nervous system like a warning bell. If your body is anxious, your soul already said no. She wakes with knots in her stomach. She feels nauseous when he doesn't respond quickly enough. Her chest tightens when he
Mentions other women. Her hands shake when she sees him online but not replying to her messages. She tells herself this is love. She tells herself this is passion. She tells herself that butterflies are romance, that anxiety is excitement, that the churning in her stomach is the thrill of being in love. But anxiety is not love. Anxiety is the body's way of saying danger, of saying flee, of saying this person is not safe for your heart. The body is the messenger of the unconscious, the voice of the soul speaking in sensation rather than words. When your nervous system is activated, when your fight or flight response is triggered, when your body can't relax in someone's presence, it's not because you love them.
It's because some part of you recognizes the pattern, the familiar dance of pursuit and distance, the addictive cycle of hope and disappointment that you've mistaken for love. She ignores these signals. She has been trained to ignore them. She has been taught that women are naturally anxious, naturally emotional, naturally unstable. She has been conditioned to doubt her own intuition, to question her own feelings, to trust his words over her own body's wisdom. But the body doesn't lie. The body doesn't gaslight. The body doesn't make excuses for behavior that hurts. The fourth truth reveals itself in the moments when she finds herself pleading, not with words, but with energy, not with voice, but with presence. She texts and waits. She calls and hopes. She gives and gives and gives, hoping that her generosity will be reciprocated, that her love will be returned, that her investment will pay dividends in affection. If you beg for it, it was never offered. This is the truth that cuts deepest. The recognition that love cannot be earned through effort, convinced through persistence, or won through perfect behavior. Love is either freely given or it's not love at all. When you find yourself begging for attention, pleading for affection, working for love, you're not in relationship, you're in transaction. You're not being loved, you're being used. She has become a key, trying to turn a lock from the outside, forcing and pushing, and hoping that if she just tries hard enough, if she just finds the right angle, the right pressure, the right technique, she'll finally gain entry to his heart. But love is not a door that can be forced open. Love is a garden that blooms naturally or not at all.
Chosen on being loved, that she doesn't notice she's locked herself out of her own heart. She has become a beggar at the table of love, grateful for scraps, thankful for crumbs, celebrating the smallest gestures as if they were feasts. She has forgotten that she is not a beggar. She is a queen. She is not a charity case. She is a gift. The fifth truth emerges like a phoenix from the ashes of her self-worth. If it breaks your self-worth, it's not sacred, it's submission. Love doesn't diminish you. Love doesn't make you question your value. Love doesn't leave you wondering if you're enough, if you're worthy, if you're deserving of the affection you're receiving. Real love amplifies the self. It doesn't dissolve it. Real love makes you more yourself, not less. Real love sees you clearly and celebrates what it sees. Real love doesn't require you to prove your worth. It recognizes your worth as inherent, unchangeable, sacred. But she has confused suffering with devotion, pain with passion, degradation with dedication. She has accepted treatment that makes her feel small, unworthy, grateful for the smallest kindness. She has normalized the feeling of not being enough, of having to earn love through perfect behavior, of having to prove her worth through constant availability. This is not love. This is submission. This is the acceptance of less than you deserve because you've forgotten that you deserve more. This is the belief that love is supposed to hurt, that relationships are supposed to be hard, that if you're not suffering, you're not really in love. She stands in her bathroom, looking at herself in the mirror, and for a moment, she sees clearly. She sees the woman she's become, anxious, diminished, grateful for scraps, begging for love. She sees the ways she's contorted herself to fit into someone else's idea of lovable. She sees the price she's paid for the illusion of being chosen. But in this moment of recognition, in this clarity born of pain, she begins to understand. These 5 truths are not condemnations. They are revelations. They are the breadcrumbs leading her back to herself, back to the woman she was before she learned that love was something you earned through disappearance, through fixing, through ignoring your body's wisdom, through begging, through breaking.
The mirror shows her not just what she's become, but what she can become again. Not just the woman who loves from wounds, but the woman who loves from wholeness. Not just
The woman who disappears to be chosen, but the woman who chooses to be seen. Not just the woman who begs for love, but the woman who embodies love. These truths are not endings, they are beginnings. They are the first steps on the path back to herself, back to the sacred feminine that doesn't need to be earned, doesn't need to be proven, doesn't need to be fixed or saved or chosen. The sacred feminine that simply is, that simply exists, that simply loves from the fullness of her own being rather than the emptiness of her own need. She takes a deep breath. She puts down her phone. She looks at herself with new eyes, eyes that are beginning to remember who she was before she learned that love was something you earned through perfect behavior, through making yourself small enough to fit into the spaces others left behind. The 5 truths burn like fire in her chest, painful but purifying. They are the flames that will burn away everything that is not love, everything that is not true, everything that is not worthy of the sacred woman she has always been beneath the layers of conditioning, beneath the patterns of wounding, beneath the belief that she is not enough exactly as she is. She is enough. She has always been enough. She will always be enough. And any love that requires her to forget this truth is not love at all. It's the opposite of love. It's the very thing that keeps her from the love she truly deserves, the love that sees her, chooses her, celebrates her, and never ever asks her to disappear.